Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. You know, when I'm sitting here and I'm researching different things about history or the mysteries that it left behind, I never know what you guys want to see. You know, I try to find things that seem interesting to me, and I try to pass it on to you, hoping you'll find the same interest in it. And you know, I got to looking into the American Revolution, and I found a lot of information about the Revolution and about the time following it, but not a lot. I mean, little this and that, but not a lot about the American, about the pre-revolution, you know, leading up to it. And I got to thinking, who better to tell you about it than one of the founding fathers? So I got to looking, and I found it. Check this out. This is good.
The year 1774 began with earth-shaking events in Virginia and with life and death in my family. On the 21st of February at 2:11 p.m., we felt the shock of an earthquake at Monticello. It shook the houses so sensibly that everybody ran out of doors. In case you're wondering, yes, my first reaction upon realizing I was experiencing the exceedingly rare phenomenon of an earthquake in Virginia was to look at a clock and note the exact time. It is what I do. Where was I? Yes, the ground was shifting beneath my feet. The colony of Virginia was shaken at its very foundations. We felt another shock of the earthquake the next day. We were also deluged by torrential rains. The Rivanna River flooded higher than it had ever, except for the Great Fresh of 1771. My younger sister, Elizabeth's body, was found 2 days following the aftershock. It appeared that she had been swept away by the raging waters of the Rivanna. We held a service for her on March 7th. She was just over a year younger than I was. It was not long after this sad event that we experienced the joy of new life. My wife Martha gave birth to our second child, a daughter, on April 3rd at about 11 o'clock a.m. In spite of my best efforts, no matter how significant, certain events sometimes defy the precision of record that is my predilection. We named her Jane, after my mother. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to remain home for very long. The Virginia House of Burgesses met in Williamsburg in early May, and it was my duty to represent Albemarle County. Tensions with one of our neighboring colonies, Pennsylvania, regarding our shared border, and which colony held the rightful claim to the land around the forks of the Ohio River, were growing. Making matters worse, an intensifying conflict with the Shawnees and Mingos in the same region demanded our urgent attention. In spite of those pressing concerns to the west, however, our focus was suddenly drawn far to the north by the next event which excited our sympathies for our sister colony, Massachusetts. On May 19th, news arrived in Williamsburg of the Boston Port Bill, by which that port was to be shut up on the 1st of June of 1774. The lead in the House on these subjects being no longer left to the old members, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, Francis Lightfoot Lee, 3 or 4 other members whom I do not recollect, and myself, agreed that we must boldly take an unequivocal stand in the line with Massachusetts. We determined to meet and consult on the proper measures in the council chamber for the benefit of the library in that room. We were under conviction of the necessity of arousing our people from the lethargy into which they had fallen as to passing events, and thought that the appointment of a day of general fasting and prayer would be most likely to call up and alarm their attention. No example of such solemnity had existed since the days of our distresses in the French and Indian War, and since then a new generation had grown up forgetful of past alarms. With the help of John Rushworth's historical collections, we rummaged over them for the revolutionary precedents and forms of the Puritans of the day, which of course were preserved by Mr. Rushworth. We cooked up a resolution. While somewhat modernizing their phrases, it appointed the first day of June on which the port bill was to commence for a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer, to implore heaven to avert from us the evils of civil war, to inspire us with firmness in support of our rights, and to turn the hearts of the King and Parliament to moderation and justice. To give greater emphasis to our proposition, we agreed to wait the next morning on Robert Carter Nicholas, whose grave and religious character was more in unison with the tone of our resolution, and to solicit him to move it. We accordingly went to him in the morning, and he moved it the same day. The 1st of June was proposed, and it passed without opposition. Governor Dunmore dissolved us, as usual. We promptly retired to the Apollo room of the Rattler Tavern as before. Upon this extra-official reconvening, we agreed to an association and instructed the Committee of Correspondence to propose to the corresponding committees of the other colonies to appoint deputies to meet in Congress at such place annually as should be convenient to direct from time to time the measures required by the general interest. We further declared that an attack on any one colony should be considered as an attack on the whole. This resolution was signed on May 27th by 89 delegates, including myself. Considering this as an accomplishment worthy of calling an end to the extended session, most of the delegates returned to their home counties. The tumbling forward of events and news, however, did not allow us to rest in the way that we had expected. You see, 2 days later, news arrived from Boston, urgently requesting support from her sister colonies. Peyton Randolph took the lead, as was his well-earned place. He convened all the members who were then in town and sent for all the members who lived close enough to assemble rapidly. On May 30th, 25 Burgesses, including myself, met again at the Rattler Tavern to decide upon a response to Boston's call for aid. We agreed that Virginia should adhere to Massachusetts' request and concur with our fellow colonies in a boycott of British goods. 25 members, however, were not enough to speak for the entire colony. We therefore recommended to the several colonies to elect deputies to meet at Williamsburg the 1st of August ensuing, to consider the state of the colony, and particularly to appoint delegates to a general congress, should that measure be acceded to by the committees of correspondence generally. Until this point, the colony's representatives had always been called together by the royal governor, speaking on behalf of the king. With this resolution, unofficial as it technically was, the legislators were calling themselves to meet, speaking on behalf of the people. It is with such quiet, incremental actions that true revolutions occur. We returned home. In our several counties, we invited the clergy to meet assemblies of the people on the 1st of June, to perform the ceremonies of the day, and to address to them discourses suited to the occasion. The people met generally with anxiety and alarm in their countenances, and the effect of the day through the whole colony was like a shock of electricity. Throughout the discussions and decisions made by the people's representatives in May, I had been called upon as a principal draftsman for the various resolutions. Witnessing firsthand the effect of those resolutions on the people, I was encouraged to elaborate. I set myself to composing a proposed set of resolutions for such delegates as Virginia would send to the intercolonial meeting. I worked on the manuscript during June and July, and having been re-elected along with my compatriot John Walker to represent Albemarle County, I planned to deliver my ideas in person in Williamsburg. Unfortunately, I became ill and had to turn back to Monticello. But I forwarded 2 copies, one to Peyton Randolph and the other to Patrick Henry. I do not know what happened to Mr. Henry's copy. I doubt that he read it. He's more of a talker than a reader. Fortunately, Mr. Randolph's copy was presented for the inspection and review of a large number of delegates. They were gathered at Mr. Randolph's house, because we, of course, had not been officially convened by the royal governor and therefore could not meet in Virginia's official legislative house. The ideas that I expressed in this document were applauded by most of the delegates in Williamsburg, but they were never voted upon. Tamer sentiments were preferred, and I believe wisely preferred at the time. The leap I proposed was too long, as of 1774, for the mass of our citizens. In 2 years' time, I would be given another opportunity to propose many of those same sentiments in a more fully developed and carefully considered manner in the Declaration of Independence. In that later and much more famous document, I would also follow the implications to their logical conclusion, which, of course, was that of a complete independence. But not even I was ready for that in 1774. Although I never intended it for general publication, my set of proposed instructions was eventually published and generally distributed. It gained me a reputation throughout the colonies as a radical thinker and writer, well before my first appearance as a Virginia delegate in Philadelphia. The title under which it was eventually published was A Summary View of the Rights of British America. As I discuss the essay here, I will refer to it simply as my summary view. Both the later Declaration of Independence and my summary view were based on the theory of natural law. The summary view, however, contained no, summary of the concept of natural law and universal human rights. They were woven throughout my 1774 essay, but I did not attempt to compress them into the form of a preamble as I did 2 years later. It was challenging enough even to assert that the king served natural law and the people rather than the other way around. For instance, my summary view stated that these our grievances, which we have thus laid before His Majesty, with that freedom of language and sentiment which becomes a free people claiming their rights as derived from the laws of nature, and not as the gift of their chief magistrate. Let those flatter who fear. It is not an American art. To give praise which is not due might be well from the venal, but would ill beseem those who are asserting the rights of human nature. They know, and will therefore say, that kings are the servants, not the proprietors of the people. The style of the summary view was one of direct address to the king. Nonetheless, I throughout placed blame on and asserted separation from Parliament. The king would have to wait 2 more years to receive corresponding acknowledgement. But that last passage, which so directly reduced the authority of the king, was a prime specimen of the qualities which made the earlier document something that would have divided rather than united the colonies in 1774 by going too far, too fast. There is a snail-paced gait for the advance of new ideas on the general mind, under which we must acquiesce. A 40 years' experience of popular assemblies has taught me that you must give them time for every step you take. If too hard pushed, they will balk, and the machine retrogrades. The thoughts I put on paper in the summer of 1774, therefore, served as acknowledgments to those who had begun to think along the same lines as was I. They also served as encouragements to those people. It was not yet their time to become the standard of the American cause. That slow pace helped me to develop my thoughts and expressions. I did include some of the same concepts in the earlier, as well as the later document, though. For instance, in the summary view, I asserted that Parliament had no right to legislate for us at all. I referred to Parliament as a body of men foreign to our constitutions and unacknowledged by our laws. I later expressed that idea with similar words in a grievance in the Declaration, to wit, He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. In 1774, however, a complete denial of Parliament's authority over the colonies was beyond what most Americans were willing to claim. The general distinction was still of the difference between the colonial legislature's rights to internal government and taxation, as balanced with Parliament's right to external regulation. My summary view basically stated that the American colonies shared with England, at least politically, a king, and nothing else. My negation of the authority of Parliament was based on my own reading of history, even if it was not unique. As had been asserted by my cousin Richard Bland 10 years earlier, Virginia was originally a private business venture, not an effort of the Crown's and the public's resources. In my summary view, I said it in part this way. America was conquered and her settlements made and firmly established at the expense of individuals and not of the British public. Their own blood was spilt in acquiring lands for their settlement. Their own fortunes expended in making that settlement effectual. For themselves they fought. For themselves they conquered. And for themselves alone they have right to hold. I later included the same idea in my original draft of the Declaration of Independence with these words. Nor have we been wanton in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend a jurisdiction over these, our states. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, no one of which could warrant so strange a pretension. That these were effected at the expense of our own blood and treasure, unassisted by the wealth or the strength of Great Britain. That in constituting indeed our several forms of government, we had adopted one common king, thereby laying a foundation for perpetual league and amity with them, but that submission to their parliament was no part of our constitution, nor ever an idea, if history may be credited. Ultimately, the specifics of my historical interpretation were unable to unify the American mind in 1776. In the final approved version of the Declaration, the concept was limited to the following expression. Nor have we been wanton in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. And that's it. As you, of course, are well aware, no dissertation on exactly how the American colonies were settled and funded found its way into the Declaration of Independence, at least not in the final version. It is as if Congress was eventually willing to say, we have reminded our British brethren of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here quite enough by now, thank you very much. So we very well believe that we are fully justified in saying that we do not have to remind them again here. That is one of the edits that I think made the Declaration of Independence weaker than it could have been. It is not the only one.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I said in the beginning, there's a lot out there about the American Revolution and, you know, the time following the Revolution when we were actually, finally, our own country. But finding a lot of information about what life was like, about, you know, the laws and the rules that the Crown put down on American citizens, it is not that easy to find. I think Mr. Jefferson done a great job telling the story and explaining not only a little bit about his own life as a free American citizen, and I think he done a great job telling you what life was like pre-revolution under the Crown in America. But that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this little trip back in history. We're going to keep it up. We're going to keep it up. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do. We'll see you in history.